Well, hello there, my fellow FileMaker friends, fans, and developers. This is Matt Petrowski creating FileMaker tutorials over at FileMakerMagazine.com. Recently, I sent out an email to a couple thousand people about the Theme Studio, asking them if they had switched to FileMaker 12 or FileMaker 11, trying to decide what direction I should go. The amount of feedback that I got back and the response was actually quite surprising to me, and this is probably going to be good for you to know as well. There were far more people already converted or converting to 12 than I expected. Probably, if I had to guess, just based on email responses of I'm going 12 versus 11, there was, I'd say, 60 to 70% were already saying that they were on or switching to 12. And the reasoning, who knows what the reasoning are. It's a variety of different reasons. But what I wanted to show you, because out of that response that I got, there was a lot of confusion and a lot of things that people were saying about the implementation of FileMaker's themes, and they sort of wanted to, some people wanted to understand, some people already understood, so I thought I would take a little bit of time to do this impromptu video. Now, I am in process of converting the Theme Studio myself. The Theme Studio itself, when you drag it onto FileMaker 12, converting it from 11 or prior, is simply just going to convert as is, which is going to be the case with your own database as well. Now, what FileMaker has provided us with in terms of the CSS is a lot of power, but there's a lot of confusion behind it in terms of how it works and how you need to approach it. So first off, what I'd like to do is I'd like to show you where this is. Now, this is going to be, people are going to do all kinds of videos about how you can edit themes, where you're going to do this, and I'd like to throw out a little bit of a caveat. Creating your own base theme, while it may be appealing and it may be something that you want to start with, sure, you can do it, but that's not necessarily what you're going to want to do most of the time. In fact, talking with John Sindelar via email, somebody who I really respect with regards to his design capabilities and the work that he does, he came to a conclusion and sort of gave me some insight and reinforced sort of what I was thinking once I started to explore how FileMaker has implemented this feature. First thing you need to know is that the themes are pretty much an all or nothing type of thing. Actually, here's the folder that I want right here. The themes, you can see right here, I am in a folder where we see a list of all of the names of all of the themes that are available within FileMaker 12. Okay? I'll give you the overview of the details of how this works. There is a themes folder, and you'll see as I hold on this, you can see that I've got my hard drive, applications folder, FileMaker Pro 12, then the advanced folder. You go into the package contents, which shows that, then there's resources, then themes, and themes are loaded from there. For any given theme, it's already been explained, I believe, in a couple other YouTube videos or videos out there, that the way that this works is that you have a theme which has a folder, and then you have the primary two files, which are going to be manifest and then a CSS file. Now, the manifest XML file obviously is going to contain the definitions overall for the theme, the preview image, etc. We'll take a little bit of a look, but we won't go super deep. You already know that it's using a style sheet, which is CSS3 that they're using, so that's where you're going to be editing things. Now, you're not going to want to replace or change everything, and in fact, you almost really don't have to go through the process of creating all of this CSS and completely overhauling a theme. You certainly can, but what you need to understand is that it does not port. The theme has to be on the copy of FileMaker in order for it to be implemented, and as soon as a new update to FileMaker comes, or if they change things in FileMaker, they will wipe out this folder, or it'll get replaced on a reinstall. So you want to be very cautious about what you do in this area. In fact, I have no intention of creating a theme builder that will build and drop themes from the Theme Studio into this folder. It's really ultimately not necessary. And I'm going to show you why. So let's take a look a little bit at the manifest and the warm CSS, just so I can give you an idea of how you can do this if you want to do this. I'm going to switch over to an editor called Sublime, and I've loaded that theme right there that we were taking a look at, the wave theme, and that's warm. Let's go to wave. The wave theme right there. Now I'm going to duplicate this and show you how you can actually see what it is that's working and how it's working behind the scenes. And I'll also show you a command, or a few little commands that I used in order to find out things. So here is the wave that I've already opened up. Here's the wave CSS, and here is the manifest XML. Now I'm using the Sublime editor, and I'm going to open up a second side so that we can take a look at the manifest. Actually, we want that over in that pane, and then over here we want the wave CSS. So clearly what we have in here is we have a bunch of CSS. Now you're going to have to go learn CSS if you don't understand all of the different properties. This item is called a selector. These items are called properties of the selector. First and foremost, you need to know that FileMaker is using absolute selectors. It does not have the concept in terms of how CSS is used with regards to classes and IDs. It does not have subclasses or classes in addition to whatever they list. So whatever you read in this CSS is absolute. There is a leading sub-summary selector. That applies to the leading sub-summary part. It has a self class, and FileMaker has designated these. These are not arbitrary. It has an inner border class, and then you can see that a leading sub-summary has a second selector of text box, which there is a root selector for text box, and it has a self, and then maybe there will be inner borders, etc. Now, if you're using a text editor like this, either TextMate or Sublime, it makes it really easy to find out what is available in a particular CSS file. It doesn't mean that that one given CSS file is listing all possible classes. FileMaker or selectors. FileMaker also has its own additional tags that it is using and interpreting. So I'm going to bring up this Command R, and I'm going to type in button just so I can have the buttons filter out. So you can see right there what I have is I have button normal self, button normal dot text, button focus dot self, button focus dot text, button hover hover, pressed, normal, inner border, hover, inner border. So you get a really good idea right here that if you reflect on the FileMaker interface, you have the different states. First, the object is button, then you have the states of normal, focus, hover, and pressed. Then you have the classes of self, which is more or less like the global. You have the text within the button, and then you have other things like the inner border. Now this applies to all kinds of different things. For example, you have portal, you have leading subsummary, you have footer. All of the common elements that we are used to have their own designations. Remember, these are absolute. Now the way that a theme gets applied to a file is it is applied by interpreting and reading in all of this CSS, and it injects it into the file, and it becomes part of the file. It no longer references this CSS. Now it does that using the manifest XML, and it does it based on this one value right there, the ID. So I'm going to show you how I actually went about going through a process of updating a theme in order to get my own base parts in there. Of course, you can go in and you can simply duplicate a theme. Let me create a new Sublime window so that I'm ready to open that up. And I will go in and I'm simply going to create the wave theme. I'm going to duplicate it and make a copy, and then I'm just going to call this wave 2. I'm going to send this to Sublime, which will open up, and I'll have access to that. I've got the wave CSS and the manifest. Now, again, the key is unique. So I'm going to change this key to wave 2, and I'm now going to save this. As long as that ID itself has been changed, I would now be able to apply this to the FileMaker database. So let's switch over to FileMaker, And let me move these off screen really quickly. My theme studio, which I'm going to be showing you, will create a new database, save it on the desktop. I'll just call it blah, replace my old blah database, go into layout mode, and it comes with a default theme selected. Now, one of the things you can control in this manifest as well is you can control the group. So because one of the things that I've learned is that working with this blah, if we go up to apply themes, which I have mine set to a key, you can see that FileMaker comes up right away with this it comes up on cool gray for some reason for me. I don't know. You can test if it does for you. So I like to put things within a group of custom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the group from specialty to custom and put it in that group. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to that FileMaker database. I'm going to bring up the change theme, and then here I have Wave, which I didn't change the name, even though I did change the ID. The ID is what's important. I apply Wave, and you can see that I've got this image. Now what I'm going to do is something that probably a lot of people will do is I will go edit this PNG. So basically on the body part, actually let's look at the Wave CSS, and we will bring up the body self. And here you can see this fm-body-alt. That is a unique FileMaker selector. But here in this body.self, so for the body part, it specifies a background image, and the URL to that image is the images folder, which is just right there relative to the file, and it's the wave.png. So I've already applied this theme. Let me edit the wave.png. I'll bring this up, and this is how I tested things out. And I will now make some changes. I'm going to put all this blah stuff on here, save the PNG, and then close that and close that up. So what I did is I modified the PNG, and I go back over to my FileMaker and I say, I know I modified this PNG that's used as a background. If I go to invoke the custom theme, you can see that Wave is still selected. If I select to Theme Studio and say OK, and then I change the theme again, switch back to Wave, you would expect that the image that I modified would show up. Well, it's not. The reason it's not is because of that ID. So heading back over to this, we can take a look at the manifest, and we will now go, and I simply just increment this. I'll go from Wave 2 to Wave 3, and I'll save. And I'll call this Wave Mine, just so we can see the difference. And you really don't have to quit FileMaker in order to do this. So I'll bring up the change theme again. You can see now it's defaulted back to the cool gray, meaning the current theme that is being shown versus the one that I had selected is different. So now when I go to Wave Mine and click OK, you're going to see that my image is now adopted. So it's very much that ID value right there. That simply all you have to do is, if you want to, as you work, to create your base portions, you can just simply increment the number and apply it to a test file. That's exactly what I did as I developed my theme. It allows me to stay within FileMaker and work on the theme while I want to work. But my whole goal in getting a theme was not to have this absolute set of CSS and actually replicate and build out this whole theme. What I wanted to do is I simply wanted to replicate certain portions that I was using based on my design. So this is where I'm going to show you the theme studio and how things compared before. So here in FileMaker 12, actually let me switch over to FileMaker 11 and we'll take a look at that. And I want to explain where this use of CSS becomes advantageous and how it differs. Actually, let's switch over to FileMaker 12 really quickly. I can't create a starter from here. I have to have nothing. All right, we'll skip that part. Let's explain what's useful about this. In FileMaker 11, we didn't have the notion of background images for parts. And most of the time, my designs, if it's a form view, I only have just the body part all across the edge. So what you have to think now is you have to think differently in terms of how things are done. And you'll notice in FileMaker's starter solutions, which I probably have one I can open up. Let's open up Open Recent Assets. There we go. So here's a starter one that FileMaker started with. So what you need to remember is when I go into layout mode, FileMaker made an assumption about all of its starter templates, and they pretty much followed suit on every one of them. They put a header and a footer and a body, and it didn't matter whether it was form view or whether it was list view. That's what they did. Well, in form view, remember that the header and the footer really don't apply unless it's a printed report. So we're going to be able to take advantage of all of these different parts and the fact that they can have a background image and have inner border settings and other things in order to control the look and feel of our database. Case in point is the Theme Studio. So switching back over to FileMaker 11, here's what the Theme Studio had before. If I was to break all of this apart, or move everything apart here, what you're going to see is that this was composed of multiple elements. Look, I had a line, and if I ungroup that, and ungroup that, and if I ungrouped that, and I ungrouped this, and move things around. So if I utterly destroy this, you're going to see what I had in terms of what was required for the background. Now I grouped all of those objects, and they were something on the layout, but they were still something that I had to manage. And they're also something that stayed consistent throughout my whole solution. So hopefully you're thinking the same thing that I thought when I wanted to move to FileMaker 12. There is no reason, given the consistency of all of these objects being combined, that I actually need to have those be on each layout. I have to copy them to each layout, and so on and so forth. So FileMaker's theme process works really well for me. What it does is I want to create a theme that allows me to get the image into FileMaker, and plus you can use a very small image, and then be able to just have that be on every layout. Now there's one disadvantage that you're going to get with what I'm going to explain, is the fact that when I use a transparent overlay of a gradient, and FileMaker 12 does support these now, what happens is I lose the advantage of being able to color this. I could go in and I could change this to whatever fill I wanted, and I instantly have a changed background. It also allowed me to use conditional formatting. So you have to use your judgment in terms of when you're going to want things to remain flexible versus when you want them to stay consistent or persistent throughout the whole solution. So here's what I did. If we go over to my test database, where I was simply using the process I just explained, where I simply just increment a number, make slight changes to the CSS, and then increment the number, and then come in and reapply, you can see what I have on screen here looks exactly like what I have over here in the original version, which has all these multiple elements. What I figured out is there is no point in me replicating all of these elements. So what I did is I used a screenshot, which that's a just standard Mac function right there, where I used Command-Shift-4, and it saved that capture to the desktop. And then I went in and I modified it and I edited it. There's a lot of things that you can do to images and to optimize them, make them better. If you're going to DevCon, I'll be speaking at DevCon, teaching a lot of these things. So if I go into layout mode, you'll notice that what I have is I simply have just a body, and I also have a footer. So what I did is on my body, I actually specified an image, and we can go over to see that image here on the Theme Studio. You can see right here, if I double click it to open it, of that graphic right there. So you can see right there that that super thin little strip is it's all of the transitions or all the different parts of what makes my header. But I'm not treating it as the header. I'm treating it as the body because I mostly design in the body. And you can see what I've done with the portal here is I simply overlaid and cut over on top of that. So the CSS simply specifies this as a repeating value all the way across, and it repeats. And then down at the footer, you can see that I basically replicated the footer. And what this gives me is this now gives me the ability to simply overlay all of my buttons or other objects on top of this, and because it's in the background, when I duplicate this, I have less to manage, a lot less to manage. So let's just say exit script, and we'll say button. So what you're going to probably want to do is create some default buttons, and remember again, there is only one object type. You can see that the button right here that I've specified, This is the definition of what's going to happen when I go up here and create a new button. That's what was injected into the FileMaker file. That was what was imported from the theme. That is what this theme sees as a button. But it in no way limits you to just this button. In fact, what you're going to want is you're going to want to use multiple different objects from multiple different themes. You're going to want to theme objects instead of actually creating different themes. So if I want to go over to the assets, if I want this pop-up and this button, which was applied on this theme, I can certainly copy this, come over, and then paste this onto this layout and use this button. It still retains all CSS attributes that were taken from when it was actually applied to that other layout. So what you want to theme is you want to theme objects. Also, I want you to recognize that when I select the body part and we go over and we look at the graphic and the fill, you can see that it's an image. So there's nothing special that I did by the fact that I did it within the actual CSS file, within the themes folder, and took the time to modify the manifest. Because I'll show you why. If I created a new layout, of course a new blank layout is going to have all of my settings. Let's just completely, utterly jack this file up, or mess it up, and we will reapply some other theme or to this particular layout. Let's go with green. So now I have a header and I have a body, and this body does not have my Theme Studio format. But watch how easy it is for me to apply this format. All I need to do is go to the fill for the body once it's selected, select image, click choose, and let me throw up my my themes over here, my image. I just need to get this off screen so that I can make it easy to select. So back in here I can click choose, and I'm just going to drag in the exact same image that I referenced within the CSS, and I'm going to insert that. So when it comes in, what you're going to see is you're going to see that FileMaker by default chose tile. Now it's pretty obvious that FileMaker is going to eventually give access to all, well, maybe that's not obvious. I don't know that they're going to do that. In all honesty, I would assume that they would want to give access to all of the different CSS properties. But because they're using CSS, they may not have all of the controls for all of different widgets, or it may not be obvious. So notice that I have the options of tile, original size, which is simply going to, they have to choose. They can't stick it on the left or the right or the top. We don't currently have a control. While you do have control for those things within CSS if you're actually editing the file. So that's why I'm assuming they will give access to those controls. So original size, they're just choosing for it to be centered within the body part. Remember, treat the whole part as just an object that has all the different properties that CSS can apply. We also have scale to fit. We also have scale to fill. And then we also have slice. Now slice is the one where you're going to get control, and that's what FileMaker has done on their layouts as well. You take a look at, for example, switch over to the assets, select the header, look at the object. You can see that the object is using multiple different slice lines, and you change those slice lines and look what happens to the object. It gets destroyed. But they have 4 slice lines here, you can see, as I drag one of these up in terms of what happens. Now these slice lines, you cannot, there's nothing that I've found that allows you to add them onto an object. This is where you would have to edit the CSS. But FileMaker does, by default, give you, actually, I'm totally incorrect. What am I thinking here? They just had 2 of them selected together. Ignore my little brain lapse there. You have the exact same amount over here. It just so happens that it looks like there's 1. You don't need to add those. But basically, these slice lines control the top and the bottom alignment. So if I move both of these up to the top, it's going to push it down to the bottom of the body part. In fact, let's get rid of the footer so that we can just work with what we want to replicate. Now, we had taken the time in the CSS to do this, but watch what happens. Just drag my slice lines, both of them, all the way to the bottom, and push this all the way to the top, and look what I have. I just did within the FileMaker interface everything that I also did in order to create this exact same theme by going into the themes interface. So what I want you to know, and the whole point of this video, is that while you can take the time to design your theme and learn CSS and use CSS, what you need to know is that 80% of what you can do within the CSS is already here within the interface. You just need to know how objects are interacting with the elements. If you don't like the footer and you want the footer to be something else, then you simply modify the footer, and then all you're going to be doing is simply duplicating your layouts. If this is a layout that I want, I'm just going to duplicate and then simply double click and reassign to show records from some other relationship. The fact that the theme itself is embedded into the file really has no bearing on the visual presentation of what objects are set to present. So by selecting on this, if I simply modify and change this to a different image for this layout, it doesn't matter that the theme originally selected for this file was the wave theme. Who cares? I'm getting the look that I actually want. The only time that this whole theme thing really comes into play is when you are doing a bulk conversion. If you've got a theme like I have for my theme studio here, and I simply want to be able to create a new theme, a new blank layout, finish that, get rid of the header which I'm not using, and just be ready to go, that's the advantage right there. It allows me to start off with my header for that is my theme, and allows me to go from that point. But in this case, creating a new layout is no different than duplicating a previous layout that is already blank, that is in my list of layouts that is hidden. That's no different. It's the ability for, if I want to go to a layout that's already been created, and then I can apply the theme. But even then, it's really not that big of a deal to duplicate a layout, select all of the elements after you've set the designating table occurrence, copy those, and then paste them onto a new layout. That's not that much effort if you want to avoid the CSS. Now, if you do want to do the CSS, then that's a whole different story, and I will talk about that in another video. Much luck, and happy file making. See you later.